My name is Jackie Bales, and today I will be talking about calcium homeostasis. Calcium is a vital mineral component for the correct function in the human body. It flows freely through the bloodstream or is deposited in bone. Along with maintaining strong bones, its two most important functions are for muscle contraction and for the nerve conduction through the release of neurotransmitters. Without these two functions, we would die. Although calcium is vital for function, too much or too little can also be detrimental. There are two terms to know: hypercalcemia and hypocalcemia. With hypercalcemia, it's when the levels of the calcium are too high. This can result in weakened bones, kidney stones, and affect heart and brain function. But when the levels of calcium decrease, it is known as hypocalcemia. Hypo means below, and hyper means above. So you can think of that when you want to know hypercalcemia and hypocalcemia. This hypocalcemia means you have excess nervous system excitability and the inability for muscle to relax. This result can be fatal. The normal levels of calcium in the human body are around 10 milligrams to 100 milliliters. In order to maintain a constant healthy level of calcium, our body has a mechanism for homeostasis. There are three main hormones that gear to maintain calcium homeostasis: parathyroid hormone, calcitriol, and calcitonin. Let's start with when calcium levels are lower than the normal level. The parathyroid is located on the back of the thyroid and has 4 locations. The parathyroid is important for when calcium levels decrease from the normal level. The parathyroid directly affects the kidney and indirectly affects the small intestine and bone. Let's start with how the parathyroid affects the kidney. In regards to PTH, there is a receptor on the kidney for parathyroid hormone. Once the parathyroid hormone attaches to the PTH receptor, the kidney generates calcitriol. Calcitriol is an active form of vitamin D. This triggers the kidney to reabsorb calcium, which then would put it back into the blood. And this is one way how it can raise the calcium blood levels in the bloodstream. Moving forward, now that the kidney created calcitriol can also move to where the small intestine is. Calcitriol stimulates the small intestine to also reabsorb calcium, which would also put it back into the blood. Now let's move on how the parathyroid hormone can also indirectly affect bone. The calcitriol that was made in the kidney goes and affects the small intestine, which we just discussed, which reabsorbs calcium and puts back in the blood. But calcitriol also affects bone and stimulates the resorption of bone. Resorption of bone basically means breaking down of bone. The reason we need to break down bone is because calcium is needed for bone formation. Osteoblasts are important in making the formation of bone. Calcitriol travels to osteoblasts, which releases the rankle. Rankle regulates the overgrowth of bone. Once this is stimulated, it stimulates the work of osteoclasts. Osteoclasts are what break down bone. This will destroy the bony matrix, which will pull the calcium out of the bone, which can then be put back into the blood. These are the 3 ways of how blood calcium can be raised and therefore maintaining homeostasis. Now let's discuss how the body responds to when calcium levels are too high. The thyroid is responsible for lowering calcium levels in the blood. The thyroid is located in the neck region. The parathyroid, which we discussed earlier, which is responsible for increasing calcium levels, is located on the back of the thyroid. The thyroid contains parafollicular cells. Parafollicular cells are what generate calcitonin. As we discussed for the parathyroid, calcitriol was what helps increase. Calcitonin is what helps decrease. There are 4 main functions for calcitonin. Let's discuss the small intestine. Calcitonin inhibits the reabsorption of calcium in the small intestine, which allows it to release calcium so that it can be excreted, which means that the calcium levels will decrease. Moving forward, let's see how calcitonin affects the kidney. It affects the kidney by inhibiting the reabsorption of calcium. This will also allow the calcium to be urinated out, which will decrease calcium levels. Let's discuss how calcitonin affects the bone. As we discussed for the parathyroid hormone, the parathyroid stimulated the osteoclasts because it broke down bone, which would put it back into the bloodstream. But since the calcium levels are too high and we want to decrease the levels, we will inhibit osteoclasts, which will stop the breakdown of bone. By inhibiting osteoclasts, we will stimulate osteoblasts. As we talked about before, osteoblasts are important in the formation of bone. This means that calcium will be taken out of the bloodstream and put into the bone for bone formation, and this is what will decrease calcium levels.